Hello and welcome to Kicking Assets, the critically acclaimed and award-winning podcast where we bring you... Stop laughing!
It's simple mathematics. It's simple mathematics.
Hello and welcome to Kicking Assets, the critically acclaimed and award-winning podcast where we give you the chance every week to fill your footy boots as we tackle the intersection of finance and football. I'm Z, a.k.a. the reluctant accountant, and I'm here to help you wade through some of the finance and numbers that happen off the pitch to give you some perspective about what's going on. And I'm here today with my esteemed co-host, Rickie Haywood-Williams.
What's going on, Z? Good?
Yeah, I'm very well. How are you?
Thanks for having me back.
Well, you know what? Literally, I mean, no one else responded, so, you know, we are where we are.
This girl.
You know, call me, anyone, like just... Anyway, but yeah, no, thank you for joining me again.
Pleasure.
You know what? And I just, before we get into it, I had some giggles earlier when I mentioned that we're critically acclaimed and award-winning. First of all, I printed out a certificate for us at home. So as far as I'm concerned, that's an award.
So it's valid.
Yeah, exactly. And critically acclaimed. We've had some for reviews. So I thought, you know what, let me just start by reading them out to you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Cool,
like,
cool.
let's start on a high note, you know what I mean? So...
Well, if there's a cross-section, could we start low and then maybe go high?
Okay.
Start with the bad and with the good, is what I said.
Okay. So there's no bad.
Good.
Per se. But we'll, you know what, like, let's start on a good note, right?
Sure.
Or a good foot, because it's
Sure.
football.
Nice.
Yeah, see what I did there?
I saw,
Thank you.
I saw.
Okay, so we've got, this is the podcast I never knew I needed, but I'm so glad Z and Rickie have united to bless us with this absolute masterpiece.
That's nice.
Yeah, right?
That's nice.
Love this.
That's nice.
They should run the country. Okay, I'm a little bit busy, but maybe Tuesday. Z is amazing. I wonder if she's single.
Oh.
Okay, I'm lying. I just wrote these on my phone. It's not actual reviews. However, you know what? But I'm just, as we're here, I just want to encourage you to leave a review. You could leave some of these if you like, or just text me and I will give you and let you know what to say. But I actually did get real feedback. And I'd like to address it because, you know what? Never let it be said that I don't take feedback. Okay? So let me find it for you. And this is real.
Okay.
This is the feedback I received. I'm 10 minutes in. So far, I'd say, let the man talk. You're all I heard for the first 10 minutes.
Now, let's be real.
So...
I like listening to you.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You know what? Never let it be said. Okay, I'm not about to be the subject of no red pill podcast, okay? Pearl, you're doing the Lord's work, okay? So what I'm going to say is far be it from me to talk about my level of expertise, or my field of expertise rather. Let me acquiesce to the men. So, Richard Haywood-Williams, would you like to take the finance sector for us?
No, thank you. No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Over to you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. You know what? There are other men here. Nee?
Hello.
Would you like to take that segment for us?
I mean, I probably could, but I want to.
No, please. Please go ahead. And Justin, would you like to take this for us?
I mean, if I had all work here in the script, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, I'm so sorry. But as my section comes first, I'm going to have to just go and try and wade through it. Please interject as much as possible because I don't want to fall foul of those people that are sick of hearing my voice for 10 minutes. God forbid. Okay, but you know what? Before we get into it, and we are going to talk about insurance today, but before we get into it, I did want to address something. Guys, I'm still hopeful about Man United. Okay, I haven't lost the bid yet, haven't won, but you know what? I'm still in there. I'm still in the running, you know what I mean? Like, until you're relegated, the last whistle hasn't been blown. So, but I did want to kind of come and say, like, you know, give us an update. What do you think's happening?
Okay, so Manchester United, the last time we were here, we were speaking that there was kind of like an imminent sale. Qatari owners looked like they had like an amazing bid on the table. Not many Man United fans are that excited about it in terms of like the kind of the moral side of things, maybe. But I'm sure they're not going to be too upset about the money that comes with it. However, there's a fan-based kind of bid as well from Sir Jim Radcliffe.
So are you considering that a fan-based thing, or just because he's a
claiming
to be a fan?
He's a fan of Manchester United. But he's a businessman. I think it's what's the company that he
Ineos. So why this is very interesting, and so obviously we know that the Glazers are universally kind of hated, and I kind of looked into that because not being a Man United fan myself, I just thought, they're just angry. You know what I mean? And but looked into it, and would you, Rickie, would you like to tell us why the fans are angry?
Okay, so you are the accountant, you know the numbers. All I know is that when the Glazers came in, I think it was 2004, 5, what they did was they bought the club, but they bought it and put the club into a lot of debt. And since then, they haven't actually ploughed much of their own money, if any of their own money, into the club, but they have taken out of the club, so via dividends and whatnot. So the fans are upset that the Glazers aren't pumping money into the club to kind of like help it grow and help it kind of like coexist in a way that it should. They're moaning that and rightly so, that the stadium hasn't been renovated and like the facilities haven't been renovated. Cristiano Ronaldo famously rejoined the club a couple of years ago, said that he went back into the training facility and said that I left in 2009. I've come back how many years later, and all the equipment is the same. They haven't even painted the place. They haven't even painted the place.
Ronaldo was like, I can still smell my sweat in here from 3 years ago. Like, what's happening?
So you can kind of get get the landscape of the thing. They're not pumping money into the club. They're not investing in the club, but they are taking out a lot.
Yeah, and I think, because I was reading somewhere, like, I think that some fans thought that the FFP gave them, the ability to have 105 million. I think this is what you thought as well, over 3 years in losses. It's 15 million. The 90 million was made up from the equity owners. So if they had injected, it could be up to 90 million.
Right.
They have injected zero. Okay. So at this time, myself and the Glazers have contributed the same amount to Manchester United. This is what I'm still hopeful. You know what? And I've got a whole plan in place. I'm just going to Phoenix the company and rename it Manchester. Just put another E in it, so it's not too different. Do you know what I mean? And it's not. Yeah, I've got a whole plan, so I'm still very hopeful about it. But just quickly on the Glazers thing, what was the problem? The problem with the model that they use, and it's a model that's used to buy a lot of companies. It's called a leveraged buyout, LBO, and basically a leveraged buyout is when you get money, you get credit or debt or whatever to fund the purchase of an asset, and then it's secured against that asset.
Like buying a house, like we
exactly. The big difference is, obviously, then it's like me buying the house, but you being the tenant and being burdened with the debt and repaying it. And so I think between the time they acquired Manchester United and now, I think they're in like hundreds of millions of debt, and I think this is the issue because they didn't have that debt in the first place.
In the first place, yeah.
So
that is why the fans are angry.
Exactly,
and rightly so.
And it can be quite controversial. Toys R Us were also famously subject to LBO.
Man, I miss Toys R Us.
Yeah, I know. There were millions, said Jeffrey, all under one roof. And that's what the venture capitalists heard, and then it went down. So, you know what? Toys aren't us right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to get into, if the men in the room will allow me, I'm going to talking about insurance now. You know what? Let me start by going over to a man. Justin, you were the one that kind of brought up the thing about insurance. Would you like to share with us why you did that? Because
come on, Justin. I
want to be led by the Y chromosome.
Insurance, legs and stuff, football. So I thought it was a good idea.
Okay, wow, that was so coherent. That's possibly why he's not in front of the camera. Anyway, so yeah, and it's one of these things. So insurance, at its base, is just a risk transfer mechanism. Now, you might not know this, but when I gave up my career as a professional footballer, I actually worked as an insurance broker in Lloyd's of London. True story. And I was there for quite a while. I wasn't working in football, I was working in aviation, planes and that. But no, I was working in the aviation department, and I was genuinely broking there. So it's a risk transfer mechanism, and essentially, you'll have grown up in the days where you got stopped and you gave producers. So I know in certain communities the concept of insurance isn't as familiar to others. Okay, we don't have the producers anymore. We actually have to have certificates and policies. Now, this is where it becomes a little bit media hype-ish, I think. So you'll obviously be aware of like the David Beckhams and the Messis and whatever, and they'll say, oh, they've hundreds of millions they've used to insure their legs and whatever.
Yeah, that's the story that always gets pumped out to the press.
Yeah,
right?
and so it wouldn't be a leg insurance, babes. Like nobody has that, okay? It would be something like disability, you know, like for people like me or David Beckham, where we're like what you refer to as generational talents.
Yep.
You would have to really demonstrate in order to get those limits that your earnings would suffer commensurate to whatever happens. So if I lost my leg, I would definitely be on track to get 100 million.
Yeah.
I have that with like, not my legs anymore, obviously, because I quit professional football, but my voice, angelic. My larynx, you know, it's about 50 million, I think. Just, yeah, I know. So despite me being told not to talk.
I used to hear that football players were not allowed to ride motorcycles or play certain sports.
And that would make sense. Yeah, but it wouldn't necessarily be something that they kind of individually, and it could be, but it wouldn't be necessarily that they individually go out and get a leg policy or whatever. So clubs will have this. Anyone that has a job, like myself, although, you know, I don't rule over any men, don't worry. But anyone that has employment, you'll have certain benefits that come with it. So you'll have like life insurance. So that would possibly pay out to yourself, or with a company. If you think about football, we think of it as something separate, but essentially it's a business. So you've got assets, you want to protect them.
Yep.
We're talking now about the transfer window and all these millions that are getting thrown around. Of course, they're going to take out insurance to protect their assets. And if you've got huge assets, such as the Messis or the Beckhams or whatever, those policies, those standard policies that maybe cover everyone else, are not going to cut it. Like your loss is going to be so much greater, and you could probably purchase like excess layers.
So would David Beckham, if he was still in this prime, let's say, I don't know, Harry Kane, he goes out, he says, I want to learn how to ride a motorcycle. Would he be allowed? Could he get insurance to do that?
No. Well, you can get insurance for anything. So he can go and get a motorcycle liability insurance or whatever for crashing his motorcycle. However, what would probably wow, I cannot speak. Probably. Did you hear that voice? Okay. So what will probably, yeah, exactly. Sorry. Can I get a C? No, I'm joking. But what would probably happen would be that he would invalidate the policy that covered him for disability.
Right.
So you would have certain exclusions in place. And that's normally what you would happen. I think what happens is it gets reported in the newspapers, and they'll be like, J-Lo's bum. Like no one's insuring J-Lo's bum for them. Like it's ridiculous because she's just giving away money.
So what would happen in that scenario? Because obviously, you know, footballers notoriously, if they're successful, can get a lot of money at a very young age.
Yep.
They might be, you know, like make some mistakes and whatnot. They might have a policy in place to not ride a motorcycle, but still do it anyway. If they had a crash or said crash, what would happen?
They will refuse the claim. And the thing is, a lot of these things, as you know, we were just talking before the show, we were talking about, you know, you working with musicians or whatever, and there's a big thing, especially now with social media, them talking about, oh, this music company ripped me off and whatever, and you'll always see some, you know, internet expert, well, you should have read the contract, which is always true. It's the same thing with insurance contracts. So at the moment, you may not be aware, but like a lot of the big clubs, Arsenal, West Ham, not Liverpool, because, no, I'm joking, but like a lot of...
Why? Why must you?
It's just so easy. It was an open goal, okay? So, no, but a lot of the big clubs are actually taking some insurers, some underwriters to court because of policy wording. So what happened, there was an FCA test case, and it was to do with nothing sexy, not legs or anything, it's business interruption. So obviously COVID came, they couldn't play, right? They couldn't, you know, teams couldn't play, they were ordered to shut down. Now, this is where it actually does get a little bit interesting, like, I'm going to probably just sound like a geek, but I think it sounds interesting, right? So they had this FCA test case, and first of all, they had, I think it's something like communicable diseases or something like that. They have certain exclusions in these things, and no one ever reads them because you never ever think that you're going to evoke them. Not like regular business interruption, but no one predicted the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Apart from that guy down at Brixton Station, he's been talking about it for years. Do you know what I mean? The pandemic. But nobody really predicted it. He knows, isn't it? He probably knows him. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, exactly. He goes, leave down around alone. But no one predicted it, right? So you have these kind of worst case scenarios, but you sometimes you don't look at the exclusions. You're like, okay, cool, that's not really going to happen. And then it happened. March 2020 said, you ain't got 2020 vision. So they came and, obviously COVID was doing a bit. I say her because it felt quite vengeful, right? And I have that in me too. So COVID came along, business interruption. First of all, the underwriters, I believe, tried to avoid the policy. They were like, no, it's not covered because we've got this exclusion clause and policy wording. So there was an FCA, what they called a test case. They went through the courts and it was said, no, actually, business interruption, this stuff will be covered.
Right.
However, this is where it gets interesting. So normally they will have certain exclusions and they'll say, oh, we'll cover, it's up to a limit, and they'll say any one occurrence or any one incident.
Right. So that's the loophole.
So this, you could have a limit of like 300 million, any one incident. So what the insurers are saying, okay, cool, you may be covered, but COVID was an incident, like it was just one incident. What the football clubs are saying, no. The government shut us down at this point, and then this thing happened, and they're trying to, they're saying we have multiple limits that are covered under this contract. And it's interesting because, again, we were talking earlier, and I think we somehow 9/11 came up. That, I'm going to be really geeky. So I'm going to let you into a little story that not many people outside the insurance industry even know about this. When I first started working in insurance, it was after 9/11, obviously. God, I'm not that old. But it was after 9/11, but it was always the worst case scenario that they'd quote. So in insurance, it's like the worst case scenario, you've got like some plane crashes into a building over a populated city, and then it happens. So what happened, and this, they've tightened up immensely since then, but what they used to have, this thing is like you'd go in to an underwriter and a lot of policies are they just renew them. Like they're like, oh yeah, it's fine, we'll just write the policy again. So they had property policy and you go to the underwriter and they kind of renew it on expiring terms.
Right.
And no one really would, at those days, like you just do stuff on the back of a fag packet. Like no one really gets round to like seeing what those expiring terms were until it lick, right? Until you have that catastrophic event.
Yeah.
So they had a few policies that were applicable, and these are excess layers. I won't get into it, but basically they had a few policies that determined how that insurance would be enforced. And it came down to any one occurrence. So was 9/11 two occurrences? There are two planes that go into two separate buildings or whatever. Or is it that one single, event where it's like, oh, we're terrorists together and we're going to go, like, look at this.
So what was the answer? What was the outcome?
Well, so what happened was there were two policies and one had defined their occurrence. So they were able to just pay out one limit, and the other one, it hadn't been defined. So they had to pay out more than one.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's kind of well known. It's like the cautionary tale,
right.
Because no one kind of really read the policy. And then when it came down to it, I think there was like a will prop, there's a Swiss Re policy or whatever. Some of the underwriters were able to avoid it and some weren't. So always read your insurance policies as well as your contracts.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, obviously you've taken it to like a really big scale, but like on a very like, every person kind of scale. If you break your phone, but your phone's insured, it's really hard to get a new phone.
Oh, really?
It's really hard. Like they'll catch you on like, oh, but it's water damage. Like you dropped in the toilet. You're not covered for water damage.
100%.
It's that.
But insurance fraud is very high at the micro level. It's very, very high. The slip and fall, and there's a certain amount of, there's a certain amount of how many of you really lost your luggage? Okay, you're lying. You are. Man's at the desk like, I can't find my bag when it's behind them. I saw you.
That's true.
I saw you. So, and all of those things do occur. And yes, on the micro level, you'll have these, and it can be difficult, but it's no less difficult when it goes up, because these underwriters are on the hook for millions and millions. So they have to spend a lot, kind of fighting claims. You get these loss adjusters out and you get these people investigating and whatever.
But just a question, if you're getting all that money in the first place, if someone takes out a policy, you're being paid like consistent money. So if in the unfortunate event that something does happen that's catastrophic, why can't you just pay it out?
They should, absolutely, and they should. But if you think about it, if they just kept on paying out like that, people just kept doing more and more fraud. Right. So like they have to kind of define the policy terms, and it's incumbent on them as well to make sure that the wording is right and whatever. So if they're going to say no, that's an exclusion, they need to prove it. And there are kind of regulators. You've got the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, and the Ombudsman. Like people can go and if they think that they're being treated unfairly. But it's crazy when it's at that level, like business interruption at that level. So like look out for that. As I said, I'm not sure if Liverpool made the cut because it was the top teams that decided
You do realise that Liverpool are one of, if not the most successful team in the UK by Manchester United.
Is that what you told you? Okay.
It's the truth. It's facts.
Okay.
Facts.
You know, yeah. Okay. But, so that's kind of how insurance really plays a role. And I think people kind of hype it up and they have this kind of, did you insure your feet? Did you insure your legs? Yes, but it's kind of part of a standard policy. And just as a quick one, as an example, with the whole legs thing, when I worked in aviation, we would have personal accident insurance for pilots. And you would literally have a schedule which tells you how much each body part will be. Like if they lose an eye, it'll be this. You know, a right hand, you got more than a left hand.
How much for an eye?
An eye for an eye. And the whole world goes blind. So you would have something similar, and probably what they would say is that, you know, for the David Beckhams or whatever, no, we need to go and get excess policies or whatever, because that's really not going to cut it for whatever they're worth. So I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but that's it. It's not that sexy. It's just regular insurance, but you know, pimped for the media. So we love that. PIMP. But speaking of a pimp, who's been pimped out today in the world of transfers? Look at that. That was a seamless segue. What?
Good save.
Thank you.
So I'd like to talk about Killian Mbappe.
Okay.
Obviously, wonder kid as a footballer. He's kind of come of age. He's now probably the best player in the world, arguably.
Okay.
In most quarters, seen as that. Plays for PSG,
Yeah.
who are one of the richest clubs in the world. Obviously, Qatari owned. And he's coming to the end of his contract. Now, he's been courted by Real Madrid, you know, football royalty.
Yeah.
So most players, when they get to a certain level, if they're in that top upper echelon, they will normally go to Real Madrid. That's, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo, whether it's Gareth Bale. That's the piece de resistance. He's been courted by them. However, he's kind of, you know, shunned them a couple of times over the last few seasons. But that's meant that his contract has got shorter and shorter and shorter at PSG, and he hasn't re-signed.
Yeah.
So he now is in a situation where he's got 1 year left on his contract.
Yeah.
If he sees that 1 year, he will then be able to leave for free, which means if he goes to Real Madrid, the outlay that they would have paid for him to PSG, they can give him a massive slice of that. He can get 100 million to himself as a signing on bonus, signing on fee, and he's a happy man and has a lot of money in his bank account. So obviously PSG do not want to let their asset leave for free, like Liverpool do on a regular basis. So there's a bit of a Mexican standoff, kind of. It's not even a Mexican standoff. Killian Mbappe he holds all the cards at this point.
And that's what I was going to say. I just also would say other countries have.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah, true that.
So could be Latin America, could be Scotland. I don't know.
But what PSG have done, they've got to a point now where they're coming across quite desperate, and they've said, look, if you don't sign the new contract, we're going to have to sell some of your teammates, some of your fellow players, because we're going to lose out so much money on you. We're going to have to recoup it somewhere. So that's going to be on your conscience. And he's like,
let it burn.
Sorry,
like, you know what, I hear that.
That's not my problem.
But it really isn't. And I think actually, I don't really like that kind of, you know, trying to blackmail me, or, you know what I mean? Like that kind of moral maneuvering.
Yeah, and they're pulling on the heartstrings.
Yeah, but you know what? It's kind of like, if I don't have, you need to recognize my value and my power. And if I mean that much to you, then we need to have a discussion about, you know, like a serious discussion.
Well, they've given him 2 weeks to make a decision.
Right, isn't he in like Cameroon or something at the moment?
Yeah, he was,
doing up diplomacy. Okay.
Did you see all that?
Yeah.
And stuff? Mad.
Love that for him.
So yeah, he's been given 2 weeks. I don't know how they're going to get around this as a club. I think what they need to do is go, look, we had PSG before there was Killian Mbappe. There'll be PSG after. Yeah. Let's just sell him. Yeah. Because, you know, no one player is bigger than a club.
No. And do you think that he's holding out to get a better deal at PSG, or do you think that he actually wants to go?
I think he wants to go. I think he knows that if he doesn't sign the new contract, which I don't think he will, he knows that he can leave for free next year. He knows that if he also doesn't sign a contract, they will have to sell him, because they're not going to want to miss out on selling the biggest player in the world. Yeah. And then he gets his move anyway. So either way, either scenario, he wins.
Like that. You played your hand
He
well.
did play it very well.
Okay,
he has played it very, very well.
Project Mbappe has an extension. You know, like it's not just about when they're a kid. You need to have that savagery in them when they're older. I like that. Astute businessman.
Yes.
You know what it is? And you know what it is? I don't like when people the game that you're created, like the game of capitalism, if you like, when you start playing it to your advantage, people want to be like, well, you know, your teammates are, they should have been better players.
Yeah.
They should have been better.
What I always find as well is it's interesting because obviously when a player isn't cutting the grade, the club will sell them with no regard.
But this is what I'm saying.
Their finance, their situation, their whole life, they're gone.
It's that whole thing where, like, you know, when you're working somewhere and they're like, we're a family. Anywhere that tells you that, leave. You are not a family. They were in it, or they'll tell you that whole thing. Oh, we've got so many benefits. One of them's death in service. How do I benefit from that? Tell me. There's not a benefit. Oh, it's for your family. I don't like them. Anyway, go ahead.
On to Liverpool. My club. Yes, sorry,
Okay,
we've got to do it. So basically, we've signed 2 players in this window so far. The first one was a player called Alexis McAllister. He's Argentinian. He recently won the World Cup with Lionel Messi and co. At Christmas just gone. He played for Brighton, who are, you know, like a slightly smaller club. No disrespect, but in terms of like the hierarchy in the Premier League, they're not seen as like a top club. But when he joined, there was a release clause put in his contract that if a big team came in for him, he'd be able to leave if they met this release clause. They didn't know that he was going to win the World Cup, so his value would then soar. So Liverpool have absolutely got an absolute bargain because they've triggered the release clause and only had to pay 35 million for a player that's probably worth about 80 to 90 million. So we've done well there. Our second player that we bought is someone called Dominic Szoboszlai.
Oh, say that again.
Szoboszlai.
Wow, Szoboszlai.
He's Hungarian. 60 million.
Okay.
Is what we paid.
Yeah.
So probably a little bit above the odds. However, you've made some kind of like ground on the transfer before. However, we've let 4 players go this year that we've let go for free because they've come to the end of their contracts and we've made no money on them. So we're now at a stage now where we're trying to do a midfield rebuild and we don't have enough money to finish off the rebuild. We have to sell to buy.
You know what's interesting? Because you were talking about, I can't remember what is it McAllister? No, the one from Brighton.
Yeah, McAllister.
Oh, it is McAllister. Let me remember it. What? Okay. But yeah, McAllister coming from Brighton or whatever. You know what? It's giving coupon cutting. It's giving like Liverpool collect coupons and they're like, oh my God, like we can go get this. Oh, okay, voucher. Okay. No, that's not, let me see if they've got any players on voucher. And they're like, oh, let me go to Brighton and get one.
No, but on a real, he was one of the standout players in the World Cup winning team.
Yeah.
And the fact that we got him for a cut down price, as it were, is like great business. As a fan, you love that because you only get a certain amount of, you get a kitty, don't you? Like every transfer window, and you don't want to waste it on like, you know, one big player when you can get 3, for example.
Yeah, for sure.
We were going to buy Jude Bellingham. He was, you know, quoted as being like over 100 million, which meant that we would, you know, have no money.
Really?
For
I don't think you guys have got that. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, well, when you let 4 players for free, we let Firmino go for free. Contract ran out. Oxlade-Chamberlain gone for free. Naby Keita gone for free. James Milner gone for free.
You might need to do like a leveraged buyout or something and just guess. I'll put it on the credit card. I just don't think you've got it.
Yeah. So as it stands, Liverpool need probably 2 more players, and we can only buy if we sell some of our current crop.
Okay.
So it's not a great position to be in, if you believe, if that's to be believed.
Okay.
Moving on, Newcastle United.
Yeah.
So they were not so long ago bought out by like a Saudi kind of like, they're Saudi owned now basically. They almost have unlimited funds, so they're going to be the next Manchester City.
Right.
They're the team that's going to rise, and in a couple of years' time, they'll be, you know, winning absolutely everything or challenging at least for absolutely everything. So they've just bought a player called Sandro Tonali from AC Milan. Now, AC Milan are a European giant. They've won European Cups in the past. They're like one of the biggest teams in Italy. Historically, they're a superpower in the world of football. Now, Newcastle United, you know, great team, great fan base, amazing fans, great stadium, but they're not on the same level in terms of heritage. So it's just interesting to see that they've now bought a player who is looked upon by the Milan fans as, you know, one of their own. He's like a AC Milan fan. Yeah. They were looking at him as being the next captain, and, you know, being there for at least a decade. And, you know, they've come in and bought him for, I think, 55 million.
So it's interesting because last week you mentioned about the player Neves.
Yeah, Ruben Neves.
Who is going over to Saudi Arabia to Tripoli salary.
Yeah, he could have gone, well, the rumor was that he was being courted by Barcelona, another European superpower, Spanish giants. Could have, gone to a team that are in line to win many, many trophies and, be totally respected in the football world. But he's decided to go across to Saudi.
But you know why it's so interesting? Because you've just said like, oh, you know what, there's this whole thing about, sports washing. I'll come to that because I did a video on sports washing. Go check it out. But I did a video on sports washing just recently. But it's interesting because there's that criticism of him going over to, that region of the world, or not necessarily at him, but like just of what the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Wealth Fund, I think that was the same people that bought Newcastle.
Correct.
Right. So
I think they bought 3 teams in the Saudi Pro League.
Right. But what's the difference there between that, then buying Newcastle, then buying my man from AC Milan, to what Neves has done?
Nothing.
But this is what I'm saying. But the criticism isn't leveled in the same way.
That's true. What I would say is that the league isn't at a standard yet that is looked upon as, if you're at a certain level as a footballer and you've got to a certain level in your career, it's like, why would you go somewhere where you're playing with players that aren't really as good as you?
No, and I get that in terms of like, okay, you're shunning the kind of accolades and the prestige of a European league.
He's basically not going to fulfill his potential.
Which is fine. He will financially.
Financially, 100% he will.
Kids will cry in the Ferrari. So...
Listen, like I said last week, I would take the bag. Like
But this is what I'm saying. But it's just more in terms of the sports washing, like sports washing. And you know what? When you were talking last week, I was trying to think of the term, and it only came to me afterwards about that whole soft power where we're trying to kind of, rebuild our reputation by, having sporting events and having the F1 and whatever else like that. So I can see that. But it's just interesting that it's his displacement actually to Saudi Arabia. That brings up this, oh, well, the Saudis are only doing it because they want to, replenish their reputation. But when they bought Newcastle and they managed to get an AC Milan?
AC Milan. In fairness, when they did buy, or when the sale of Newcastle was going through, there was a lot of kind of uproar.
And yet we've all forgotten.
I wouldn't say forgotten. Don't get me wrong. Like I get that side of it, but the way that I look at it, in football, there's always going to be somebody that's got more money. There's always going to be a team that's got more money, and that team, it's just the food chain, isn't it?
Yeah.
That team will buy from the smaller teams. That team that gets bought from will buy from a smaller team, and it just filters down.
But and I completely agree. I think this is the way the wider game of capitalism is played, and then you've got the football that interacts with that kind of framework that we already have in place. My issue is then when people start moralizing from a hypocritical standpoint. It's not like, okay, I get it. Like definitely, human rights abuses here, there, and everywhere. But it's kind of like, is that what you're upset about, or you're upset because they got more money than you?
I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a bit of both. But you're right. I think most people will complain and they'll throw stones at the situation until their team gets taken over by like a gazillionaire or like a state-owned situation.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? On that, I'm just hoping I don't get stoned for talking over men in this episode, because we've come to the end of it. So I'd like to thank you for joining me again today. Look at that. I've managed not to repel him. Hopefully you'll join me again next week.
Absolutely.
I will keep my talking to a minimum. And
don't do that. We need this. We need you.
I have got some critical and, I never let it be said that I don't listen. Okay, so when you come back next week, not to spoil the surprise, but I'm going to talk a little bit about those football clubs in debt. No, I'm joking. I'm going to talk about debt football clubs, how they manage to keep going, and how financial fair play feeds into that. So, apart from that, what do you think's coming up in the spicy transfer window?
Well, we spoke about it last week about the transfer of Declan Rice from West Ham to Arsenal, a British record transfer fee from one British club to another. 100 million, 105 million, I should say. But it hasn't gone through. Hasn't gone through yet. As it stands at this moment in time right now when we recorded this podcast, it still hasn't gone through. So I think by the time we get back next week, that transfer should have gone through and the pay structure would have been dealt with and we should know the final details of the deal.
Oh, lovely. Shout out to Arsenal. But yeah, so let's look out for that. And maybe I also would have had the winning bid on Man United. So
good luck.
Club owner, what? Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to have you here again, and I'll see you next week.
Kick in the asset. Kicking the asset.
This episode was produced by Neodate Evans, Justin Chinieri, and was filmed in Renaissance Studios in Brixton.
Kicking the asset. Kicking the asset.